Okay, we are live. So, just before we jump into things, I just want to give a bit of a shout out. Hold on one sec. I'm getting feedback from you. I just want to give a shout out to my friends at Beck News. They keep me up to date with all things global and farming. So that's Trent Luce in Nebraska, Damien Buckley in New Zealand, Kelly Seaton, No Farmers, No Food in the UK, and Andrew Henderson. Well, I miss you. He's also in the UK. So that's my little shout out, and we'll dive right in. My guest today is Trish Cookson. She's an advocate for farmers and property rights, and very involved in the Reconnecting Rivers ordeal that's going on with people who have farming land on the river. So, Trish, if you could just introduce yourself and start with a background of how you came to be where you are now with this issue that's going on with us now.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Trish. I've got a property at Borambola. It's 1,138 acres, of which we have about 7 to 8 kilometres of river frontage on the Murrumbidgee River. So we run it as a beef property. It's got 3 tiers to it. There's a lower tier with river flat country. Then there's an irrigation tier. And then there's a hill country with crappy hills in the background that have actually saved our bacon throughout this whole ordeal. So in 2019 and 20, my son sent me, or 19 or 20, my son sent me an article that was in the Land newspaper to say, we're looking for input about the Reconnecting Rivers program. And I had never heard a word about it beforehand. And I got online and Googled it and found out, my God, what they are proposing to do is going to absolutely decimate our farming business. So I promptly put a submission into the Reconnecting Rivers group about the planned changes and what they were going to do, and heard nothing back from them, of course. So it all just sat and stagnated then until the start of 2022, or 2021, our country, I should say that the bottom tiers of our country remained pretty much unavailable for us to use because the rivers were being run at such high levels. There's a billabong that cuts through from the top end of our property to the bottom end. And once the river gets above a certain level, the waters flow through, and that prevents us from accessing those bottom flat areas in our country, which are also our best parts of country because they're rich, fertile river flats. So I noticed that in 2021, I was going like, what the hell's going on here? And then in 2022, when Reconnecting Rivers started to put out all their paraphernalia and advertising, of which, you know, it was sort of a bit hit and miss. It was mostly about the Indigenous and the frogs and the fish, but never about the landholders and what was happening to them. So May 2022, I was very concerned about what was happening, our inability to utilise 40% of our property. I went to the Water Strategies meeting in Wagga Wagga, which was run by the DPIE, and discussed with them at that point in time, we were facing a third La Nina winter year, and the dams were being held at 95% and 98% above us. And I begged the DPIE and the Water Strategies Committee to get rid of some of that water out of those dams because you could see what was going to happen. It was just going to become a disaster. And that's exactly what happened. In August of 2022, there was the first significant rainfall event for the winter, which meant that about 100 millimetres fell above us in where the dams are. And at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, they had to release over 100,000 megs per hour. And the result of that was we had a massive wall of water that came down through our property and inundated about 55% of our place at the time, nearly took the houses and sheds out. It just crept up to within about 10 metres of the houses and sheds. And it stayed there, which was the problem for us. We had barely been able to access the country then for nearly 2 seasons. So in that flood event, we lost significant numbers of cattle, 10 kilometres of fencing, solar power systems, irrigation infrastructure, you name it, we lost it. And we spent many weeks and days, many days more like it, sorry, when we could, dragging carcasses of animals out of the water and loading them up onto trailers and trucks and digging big pits so that we could bury the carcasses. And since then, I've had a running battle with the Reconnecting Rivers people, which possibly at times I have behaved not entirely appropriately. I've been pretty angry about what's happened, the way they're doing it, the fact that they haven't pre-warned us about what they were doing. They haven't come on farms and spoken to all the farmers that are most likely to be affected and said, look, this is what we're going to do. This is how we propose to mitigate some of the issues. This is our plan going forward. But they haven't had any of those ongoing conversations, and that has made me pretty cranky.
Trish, I've spoken to some people that have been here a lot longer than I have. Like, I'm fairly new to the area. We've only been here for 6 odd years. And those 2022 floods, to the people that I've spoken to, have said that it was unprecedented, the amount of time that the water stayed up and sat around, that normally the floods just come up and subside, no real big deal. But it seems like that the time frame that the water stayed on the land really did damage country. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, massively. And I think there's been an agenda behind it, although I have no proof of this. It's just a gut feeling that I have about what's been going on. Is that in order to validate and test out their water modelling on the rivers, I suspect that they may have been maintaining the dam and river heights at levels way above what is the acceptable levels, in order to see how it panned out in the event of this bigger flood event. The problem with doing that,
I kind of feel that it was a test run. I think that it was a test run for what they're planning to send down the river at us in the future. That's my spidey sense going off. Call me a conspiracy theory. It is only a conspiracy until I'm proven right. But I certainly think that when you draw the dots, that they want longer duration of floodwater on land. I think that that's probably what we're looking at, the 22 flooding, even though that they say that their modelling is not on that particular flood. Their modelling is a lot earlier. The modelling also does concern me a lot. We were presented with mapping that had been done, and I did my research before they came out here. That was the LLS that was coming out doing the, information session, I guess you'd call it. And I had done my research. I had looked at the flow rates at Wagga, and I had gone back to see the levels at Erangara at the same time as those flow levels. And then I had cross-referenced with photos that I had from the floods we had here to gauge at what level, flow rate and so on, how it actually looked at our place. And the maps were just way off, like completely off. They did say that they could go back and have a look at, their aerial imaging, and would readjust the mapping to reflect what I had told them. I have looked at that mapping just within the last month or so, and there is still no change. And that's probably 18 months ago. They have not updated the mapping to reflect what I said. So they either don't believe me, or they just don't want people to know how bad it's going to be. That's my feeling.
I think
so
the thing they haven't done is they haven't truth tested any of their mapping or modelling, because they haven't come out on farms and actually had a look at where the waters did get to, or how far it spread, or how long it stayed, or if they want to live by that modelling, then they should be truth testing that and getting on farm and actually finding out what is really happening on farm.
Yeah, I'd like to know if anyone out there has actually seen updated modelling after they've spoken to people, because I certainly haven't, and I can't find it anywhere. Yeah.
Well, I haven't heard of it, but it's possible.
But they won't even talk to you,
Yeah.
will they?
No, they won't. They won't have a conversation with me. So.
Yeah, well, that kind of leads us into another topic of conversation, is that the treatment of the people that have spoken up, asked questions, perhaps not been very welcoming, but they tend to go to a system whereby they just silence you, put you on their farm system as being hostile, and therefore they don't have to talk to you anymore. Yeah. So I know that's happened with LLS to people in the past. We've got proof of that have happened. Like, it's happened to my husband. They won't talk to him anymore about anything. Falsely labelled, just because he's, can have a passionate conversation. He's fairly direct. You've got no mistaking what he's thinking. They don't like that. They can't cope with that. So their go-to is just to list you on farms as being hostile or aggressive, and then they don't have to deal with you anymore.
Yeah.
That happened when they came to visit me, and I said I had a neighbour wanted to sit in on the conversation, and they asked me whether that person was Trish Cookson, and I said it was, and they said we've been instructed to leave and not have the meeting with you if she turns up.
Yeah, it's censorship, that's for sure, and it's part of the reason why we're both here today. I think, I think there's a lot of conversations that need to be had by property owners and the broader community, because it will affect them too. That there's absolutely no platform to talk about these things. And I think that it's not that far away before they're coming with a big fat check, watch out when the government comes with a gift, because there's, usually something behind it. And I don't think people are actually really aware of what they're signing on to. These easements that they plan to put on our properties are forever. They will be there forever. So the decision that property owners make now will affect if they don't have kids. If they have kids, it's going to affect their kids with that land if they're looking to pass it down to them. If they're thinking about, cashing out and going somewhere else, well, whoever buys that property, is going to have to deal with the decisions you make into the future. I just think it's horrendous. Like you say, that it cost you a lot of money, that flood in 22. I can't find out anywhere where they have actually written about the frequency of when they plan to do this, how often. They sort of say yearly or every 2 years, perhaps every 3. There's nowhere that says we promise we'll only do this to you once every 3 years. It could be, 3 times in one season. Who knows? Yeah, there's nothing there that sort of stipulates exactly what the plan will be. And I've also got. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, one of my big issues is what happens if they get it wrong? So they're running the river at their peak level, which is 44,000 megs, whatever it might be, 40,000 megs, whatever their peak level they decide to run it at. What happens if there's a rain event just prior to or just after that is unexpected or unpredicted, and suddenly you have 65,000 megs running past your place, which really means that your property's totally gone. Once you sign that agreement, there's going to be no further compensation if they get that right or wrong. That's it.
Yeah. By signing that easement, there will be no more compensation.
And we've seen how accurate the weather reporting is. You know, like it's been all over the shop. We've been in drought, La Nina. You know, they're changing their predictions almost monthly at the moment about what's going to happen, what we're facing, and they're no better with their rainfall events.
Oh, I wish I could have the job as the weather person, because you can get it wrong all the time and you never get sacked.
I've already said that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Have you been?
So,
have you been?
Sorry, go ahead.
The landholder meetings. Are you going into the ones in Wagga?
I have put myself down for this next one. So that's next week. I think Wednesday we're going in to have a chat. So I'm not expecting anything. All they're going to tell us is how they're going to go about, getting us all to sign on to this. And obviously for the least amount of money that they can possibly afford. It's a bit sad also that they're going to put a carrot out for people and say, oh, we'll build bridges and culverts and access to your pumps and so on and so forth. But people don't realise that that's going to be factored into the price that they dictate for your land. So you're not actually getting anything financially beneficial. It will be taken off. Whatever the cost of that is will be taken off what the land value is that they calculate this. Sorry?
I haven't heard that stated before.
Yeah, I read that today because I've sort of been on this and off it and on this and off it. And to be honest, I was hoping that someone else would pick up the ball and run with it. Like, yeah, I'm a bit out of my comfort zone on a live stream, to be completely honest.
Me too.
But it's important to me to get the word out. No one's talking about this, and it is a much bigger issue than the buybacks, in my opinion.
Just, Ingrid, there are farmers along the Murrumbidgee near us who have not been approached in any form yet by the LLS, Reconnecting Rivers, DPIE, Water New South Wales, whoever the various groups are that are dealing with this. And they know nothing about what's happening except through our own conversation with them, which I find extraordinary, because they would have a list of all the landholders adjoining the river.
Yeah, of course they do. I've been told 3,000. Now I'm not 100% sure whether that is Murrumbidgee and the Murray, or just the Murrumbidgee. I have a feeling that it's potentially just the Murrumbidgee. So 3,000 people are going to be affected. 3,000 families are going to be put through hell and back every time they decide to inundate our land for, however long, however many times. I think it does really encroach on property rights, and it is disgusting, really, that people, the first thing that they know about this will be a letter or a knock on the door saying, here, sign this easement, and the more you dig, the more you find out, and it takes time. And I'm someone who works in the water industry, so I sort of know where to look. A lot of people probably don't know where to look to find the information that they're interested in.
Well, the other thing about that is that if you're running a business as a farmer, then you often don't have extraordinary, like great wallops of time where you can filter through all the information and read through all the documents that are coming out. We could be on a webinar or reading a document practically every night or day of the week if we really got engaged in it. But we're still trying to run a business. We have families. We've got other things happening in our lives that we need to address at the same time as trying to do all of this. It's really all consuming.
It is time consuming. Yeah. It's time consuming, and you also feel so alone because you're like, oh, I don't trust anything that they're giving me. And I know we're not alone. I know there's a lot of dissenting voices out there, And I'm hoping that this platform will give opportunities to people to just jump on and say what they're thinking. Someone out there might be able to answer their questions. We're sure not getting them from Water New South Wales. We're getting a whole lot of spiel, some very polished people saying the right things. For instance, I said I wanted to find out exactly when, how much the environmental flows in the past have been. I got sent an email back after they've discussed amongst themselves, but I still can't identify, on what dates, how much was let out. That information is just not there.
Well, I think, Ingrid, that the information is there, that they just don't want to make it accessible to us. So I've been asking for the same information through our local MP, and maybe it's just been accidental, but I did get an email back the other day when I re-asked for the same information, just saying, it might not be available, but they will know, and they will have written documentation of when environmental flow has been released and how much water has been released with those flows.
I'm not an irrigator, but I do know that the irrigators have to order their water so that it gets let out of the dam. And I'm assuming that they run the same sort of books on the environmental licenses as they do on a standard Murrumbidgee general security or high security license.
That would have to.
It makes sense to me. Yeah. So, I don't know, what do you do for this? Do you go a GIPA to try and line that up? I'm not sure.
And that's one of the difficulties that we face, having the time, the energy and the financial resources to be able to track down some of the information that we need to support or to clarify issues for us. So it's awfully difficult to do that because you just have a finite resource of all those things.
Yeah, well, that would be one way where you could tell in 2022 whether they topped up the water to make sure that we stayed under for the 6 days. I know our paddocks, we couldn't get on for 3 months after. They were just too wet to get down and fix fences because we would have got tractors bogged and so on and so forth. I'm in a good situation in a way in that I don't have a lot of land. I don't have a lot of cattle. There's a lot of issues there with, your cattle farmers. Speaking to them, they've got to look at moving their stock somewhere else. If they don't have somewhere else to move them to, then they have to sell their stock. And then when it does dry out, what do? Buy the stock back? You might be selling at a low price and buying at a high price. There's a major loss just in that. Alternatively, if you do have somewhere to put them, then you've got to feed them.
And the other thing about that is if you do take your animals off such a large percentage of your property, then you're going to be playing with a lag effect with the rest of your property, because you often, even if you feed them, you're overgrazing the area, you're using the water resources which might be limited up there. The river's obviously a great source of water and you're no longer able to use it. So you exacerbate the issues in those other paddocks, and then you've got to play catch-up Casey with all of those down the track. And just going to the other point that you said, you don't know about whether they let out environmental water during that flooding event. I'm quite sure that I read somewhere on an email or a public media release that they were actually spruiking about how they put additional environmental flow water out to reach further billabongs and wetland areas during the peak of that flooding event or on the back of it.
Yeah.
Which to me is morally reprehensible, because it just exacerbated and prolonged the flooding for so many people from here all the way through to the Murray River and beyond.
Yeah. Absolutely devastating. Absolutely devastating for so many people. I just gobsmacked at that 22 flooding. It was tough times, and that brings into mental health as well. It was very stressful. I mean, I watched my next door neighbour's goats float away, By the time we thought maybe we should go and try and rescue them, they were gone. They were down the river somewhere. That brings me to another point too, the carbon cycling. Like they say they want this environmental water for carbon cycling. I had to ask, what do you mean by carbon cycling? The answer I got was essentially, I'll just try not to say it, stuff flowing down the stream. So that includes, your dead carcasses and your drums and whatever. I get beer bottles and aluminium cans and thongs washing up. So yeah, they're carbon cycling. They want, stuff going down tree branches, and I think the environmentalists sort of think that it helps the fish or something, feeding the fish or something. I'm not sure. I haven't quite worked it out how garbage going down the river is actually environmentally friendly. It doesn't look that great to me from where I stand. Yeah.
Well, from a biosecurity point of view, we have massive issues with it because we cannot practice biosecurity on our property because we can't fence it off securely. We can't protect it from other animals or rubbish or, as you say, chemical drums, whatever else floats down that river. We can't protect our property from it. And yet at the same time, the government's actually talking about putting on a biosecurity tax or levy onto farmers. Well, it just seems so wrong when we can't actually practice it, even though we would like to do it to the best of our ability. But given the situation we're in, it's impossible.
Yeah. I have spoken also to the anglers, so your recreational fishermen, because one of the things that they talk about is that this environmental flows is going to help the fish. So I did make the time. I don't know anything about fish, so I thought I better go and find out. And the recreational anglers actually have a term for what they do when they release the floodwater, and they call it thermal pollution. So thermal pollution is a big deal in the fish world because when they let out the water from the dam, it comes out of the bottom of the dam, not the top of the dam. And that water is icy cold, and it will kill all the juvenile fish. So the anglers are actually worried about the environmental flows for the reason that, the juvenile fish population take a massive kill hit. So something I didn't know, and something that I think people should keep in the back of their mind, that it is not for the fish. This has got a completely different agenda behind it.
Yeah.
Sorry, should I take you in a direction that you don't know what to say?
Oh no, I think it.
We all pretty well understand.
We've been sort of talking about this for a couple of years now, and going to meetings and listening to webinars and trying to engage politicians and writing to people, and the end result has pretty much been the same in whichever direction we go. There's sort of been a total ignoring of the whole issue, or the other side of it is they just fob you off to they've fractured the way they present everything. So you might have the Three Rivers group come on to check how many crossings or culverts you have on your property without telling you that they're part of this program. Then suddenly that you have DPIE water talking about climate change and environment, talking about the dam storage levels, etc. Then you've got Reconnecting River Country program putting out all the webinars, and then you've got the local lands people who are coming out and doing the inspections if you're lucky enough to get them to come on farms. So they're kind of fracturing and dividing, and finding the right sources for information and following it up can be quite difficult.
Just with you, I know you've got some things coming up, lobbying local members and so on. Is there anything, Trish, that we can do to assist you with the push there? My thoughts are either emails or well-timed letters from a number of people. Like, is that something that we can do to help?
Well, perhaps the more people that express their concern about the program and what the impact's going to be is probably the better. But so the more voice out there saying, hang on, let's see what really is happening here, the better. But there has to be validity behind the arguments. There's no point just saying it's a bad idea, because you actually have to be able to sort of back that up with evidence of why it's bad. You know, like I've got photographs of riverbanks that are washed away. Pat's got photographs of 50 acres of his country that's no longer accessible. I've got photographs of beautiful, majestic river red gums that have come down. I've got photographs of calves and animals strung up in trees and fences, you know, packed with timber and, you know, but we just need more and more of it to say, have a look at what really is happening. This is not all one-sided. We need to see the greater, both sides of the picture, not just one side.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you want to circle back to the biosecurity, like weeds? Where do you stand with the weeds and your flood? What have you experienced with that?
Heaps.
Massive issues.
Yeah.
So I would say,
Yeah.
by hand, I've had to eventually, when we could get onto the country, put out 10,000 litres to kill, by hand. This is not when we were able to access it with tractor, to kill blackberries, burr, Negura burr, lipia, you name it, all these weed species that we've spent the last 7 years trying to eradicate from our property, and suddenly there was just this massive impact. All of those paddocks that got flooded extensively and for long periods of time, because we hadn't been able to access them for so long, had a huge bank of dry matter on them, and then the floods have come across those paddocks and they have dumped sand and silt with the flooding event, and timber and whatever else, chemical drums, whatever else has come. But so when we were able to access those paddocks, they were just either pans of sand and silt that you couldn't run a disc or a time machine through because it was too thick, or there were mats of couch grass that we'd spent the last 7 years getting rid of. So we had to spray those paddocks 2 and 3 times to try and knock back that couch, and then speed till every paddock to get so it was friable enough and open enough that we could actually seed it down again to something. We lost all our permanent pasture down there, all our phalaris pastures, they just all died. So we're back to having annual pastures, which are high input in terms of seed, high input in terms of fertiliser, high input in terms of chemical, not the desired practice. You know, then you have this feed gap period between when the annual pasture dies out and when you can resow it if you can access that country again. So it's not the ideal way to farm. It makes a very expensive farming system that we're running, and a very stressful one.
Yeah. So if that happens to you, say every other year, what do you think that will do to your business?
Look, personally, I think our business is absolutely screwed, for want of another word. Sorry for the, but I can't see that we can maintain a viable farming operation if we are going to lose over 40% of our property, and for extended periods of time, because that billabong won't allow us access to it, you know, on a regular basis. I just can't see how we can do that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty.
Do you think that there's a monstrous agenda behind it, in that, you know, you can't make it viable anymore, so, you know, the banks come in, shut you down, sell you up, whatever, that there might be sort of multinational companies coming in behind that to purchase up cheap land?
No, I think that's I mean, I think this is
conspiracy.
I do think it's a conspiracy theory sort of thing. I think it's being driven by this push with the Murray-Darling Basin for greener, more water, better environmental outcomes. And look, we are environmentalists, and we are much like the Indigenous people. We actually see ourselves as custodians of the land for the next generations. So, you know, their push is for an idealist view that isn't necessarily practical. The problem for me is that if they're going to take away what my family and my forefathers in the last 7 generations have worked so hard for, then there has to be adequate compensation so that we can go out and restart somewhere else, which is sad, but that's what I think is probably the best option.
So,
and then flood the land.
What do you think the our forefathers, I guess, the guys that came up with the big plans to, make the dams way back in 19 whatever it was, for irrigation purposes to feed the nation. What do you think they, think about all this happening? They're going to take the water that they've collected. Pretty wild.
Pretty horrifying.
Yeah, I know.
Because
people died on those dams.
Yep, but the river system is not designed to be a channel and take the amount of water that they're trying to put down it. That's why all your banks and your trees and everything are falling in. And I personally think I got photographs here that we ought to put up on Facebook, let everybody know what's actually going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be good to share a few pictures around of erosion in particular, because I think that's going to be a massive problem.
But we actually, Ingrid, we actually need the Reconnecting River Country people, or whoever they're going to be asking to come on. They need to come on farms and have a look at what actually is happening, but they don't want to hear it because it's confronting to what their view of what should happen.
What they've been hoodwinked into knowing.
Yeah, it does make me wonder. It would be much cheaper if they sort of piped water into these areas that they want to be wetlands.
They've still got to get
it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Still got to get the water down there.
Yeah. So if they want to water, they've still got to get the water down there. I think the problem is there are so many different parties that have got interests in this. You've got irrigators who are pushing for more water to go out, west and to open up, cotton production or almond production or whatever it might be, wheat belts, whatever it might be. So you've got the push for all of that water to go out for that. You've got South Australia wanting more water over the border down there. You've got all the green people who are saying we just want rivers full of water all the time, which is not natural. Like, that's not how they would have ever run it. There would have been ebbs and flows in the river levels. So, and then you've got farmers who are saying, well, we've bought and paid for this land, not only with money, but with our blood, sweat and tears. And, you just can't take it from us or destroy it without some sort of reasonable compensation or mitigation or whatever it might be that's required.
If these wetlands were supposed to be flooded as regularly as what they talk about, how come you go out west and you see them now where there's giant trees, red gum trees, all dying because they've been underwater for too long? Australia was never a place where you were going to be flooded every 2 or 3 years. You might have had a big flood go down there once every 10 years and then dry out. It's only the so-called gurus that have thought it up and said, well, no, we've got to flood it every 3 times a year or something stupid. It's not meant to be.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that sentiment. I think it was Sturt that walked through the Murrumbidgee area down through Leeton and so on. And he documented massive red gums that were sort of a metre across, growing in the middle of the riverbank, like in the riverbed. So it had been dry for long enough for those trees to grow that big. Yeah. They failed to take the drought years into consideration of what the environment was like way back when. before our irrigating pioneers, of course.
It is a complicated issue.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I sort of wanted to make a note of, that there is still some constraints to their program that they haven't got through yet. One that I identified is Water New South Wales operating licence actually for the dams. That's due to be renewed in 2025. At the moment, it actually says that they have to, in their operating licence, they have to mitigate against flood damage. So that line obviously needs to be pulled out. And also there quite potentially is still some legislation that needs to be changed around this. So I want to give people some hope that there are a few things that need to happen before they can do this to us. I know my stance is no to the easement. I will, fight. That's where I'm at. I'm not motivated by money. I don't really care what they come at me with as an offer. I'm just appalled at the easement business. I mean, it's a lot of land that they're going to tie up. They might say now that you can continue to use it for what you've been using it for. That leaves a bit of wiggle room there. So if I've got stock on there, am I no longer allowed to crop? Who knows? And also, with a flick of a pen down the track, they can change the use of that land that they've got the easement, just through the parliament quite quickly with no problems.
It's a known fact that any easement put over any country devalues it.
Yeah.
Nobody's thought about that or taken it into
account. I thought about it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing is, sorry, go ahead, Trish.
Sorry. Just when you talk about, you're totally opposed to the easements, my general feeling, having sat through the webinar the other day, was that you either go there. It's virtually like blackmail. Like you either go with the easement or there's no compensation, and they'll still do the flooding. So that's, or they'll have a compulsory acquisition of that easement. So, I mean, I think whatever happens, we need to work with these people to achieve the best outcomes, but there needs to be consideration of our needs and our position in that process.
I think
we
really need to band together and employ a very good legal person who I've been told about. There's a bloke over in Canberra that did a lot of work with the Victorian stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that is one way forward.
It's an expensive way.
Yeah, to see.
It is.
I mean, I don't know whether there's a precedent on the easements or not. I mean, in my mind, easements are, for supply of perhaps power, water pipes. I don't know that there's a precedent on an easement to run flood water across your land. I would actually like to engage someone legal to tell me whether that, it has ever been done before. Is this a first?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Because it does say an easement can be for water supply, but you would imagine that's in a pipe under the ground.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Not across the top of your...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got that.
But this is actually not water supply for human consumption. It's water supply for environmental.
Yeah, well, they'll say that's more important anyway.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
an easement is to help a person or an individual as well. I don't know if this is why they're moving towards, the rivers having an identity. Maybe that's hooked into this as well.
You can see what's going to happen. The next thing is they're going to want us all to fence the river out. And how in hell are you going to do that? It's all right if you're over on the outside of the bend or the horseshoe, you won't get wiped out, but anybody on the inside is going to be putting the fence up all the time. So you're not going to be doing that every time there's a flood.
Yeah, well, there's another little note too. Oh, I'm thinking of so many things. You know, we border onto Crown land, and when our fences go under, it's on us to replace them. There's no sort of neighbourly 50-50 and so on. So that is something else for people to think about. If they're flooding us every year or every other year, you're going to be replacing those fences yourself every time.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. The other, like with my stance on no easement, no way, there is one other sort of thing that my brain's been thinking about, and that is class actions. Go no easement, class action, you know, compensation that way.
Yep.
But
that's what we'll get down to in the future.
That's going to be fairly taxing for all of us.
My oath.
All right. Well, so we've come to about 45 minutes, which is sort of where I wanted to end up with. I think, you know, most people, half an hour is not long enough to have a chat, but an hour's sort of getting on and people start to tire out. So I would like to do this weekly until either I get silenced by El Governmente or we run out of things to talk about. So if Trish, if you want to come back, by all means, you're very welcome to join again. Otherwise, if there's someone else out there who wants to talk, sure, just send me a line, put something in the comments, and we'll try and contact you or contact me. But unless there's something else you want to add, Trish, now we might wrap it up and come back next week, same time, same place, and continue the conversation if you'd like to.
All right. Thanks, Ingrid. I'm fine.
No worries. Thank you.
Yeah.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.